just the
Guys, welcome
jankiest.
to the first ever quarantine cast brought to you by Corridor Digital. I've got here with me Niko.
Hi, everybody.
I've got Wren.
Oh, hello there.
And we've got Christian via audio only loop because his camera was breaking right before we started to film this. But here we all are.
What's
Christian,
up,
you
y'all?
there?
What's up, y'all?
He's there.
What up, Christian?
Christian happens to be using a
And-
really nice microphone too, so he sounds like he's actually in a podcast studio.
Yeah. what mic did you get? One of those Sures? Those
No, it's
SM7Bs?
No, it's like a Marantz all-in-one camera and mic tower thing.
Oh.
So it's all
Nice.
built into one thing. But yeah, the camera's freaking out right now.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
we're all
we're
at
gonna
home.
do this. Welcome home, boys.
Thank you.
You guys been good in
this
self-isolation?
Day 6 of quarantine.
Is
Yep.
it day 6 already?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you hear
Wow.
a baby in the
How they
background, it's
fly by.
because Milo
Wait,
doesn't.
no, today would be day 7.
No, we started quarantine on Wednesday, so we have one more day.
Wednesday.
Yeah,
Tomorrow's
so
our day
today's
7.
Tuesday.
So it's only 5.
Are you an index 0
I
or
mean,
an index
you count
1
the weekend,
kind
I
of guy?
guess. So 7. 7 counting the weekend.
See,
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like I'm working more. Do you guys feel like that?
Yeah, I'm with you, Jake.
It's
for
harder
sure.
to like invest myself into like the right mentality to get work done sometimes.
Okay, so you're one of
As
those.
I hear a baby in the background.
I immediately discover that there's 2 kinds of people when it comes to working from home so far this week. There's the people who are like, it's harder for me to get stuff done because I need that physical space that I go to that I'm used to doing work at.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also the people that are like, no, I get more done now because I never leave work. It's
Yeah.
always with me.
Clint's one of those guys who's getting more done now than if he was at the studio, because he likes to zen out and like put on his like ambient music and like get really invested into something. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I'd say I'm a mix because I still need that place to work. So we actually have like this separated wall that opens up in my den. So I do have like my office still that I can go and just plug in, but it's at my house. And then obviously step into the living room and kind of get that break
it's
and
nice.
see Kelsey and stuff.
Yeah,
So it's
My
a little
desk
mixture
is
for me.
in my living room.
Oh, okay, so you're in
Oh,
the action.
I recognize where it is now.
Oh, you're up in the action.
that's where
Yeah.
we did the tactical 3 loads or tactical reloads. Yeah,
And Darth Santa.
and Darth
I
Santa.
remember here, if you guys don't recognize it from Tactical, do you recognize it now?
You got a nice little battle station set up there. They got those RGB keyboards to make you type fast.
Yeah, I actually just picked that one up. I got that. It's wireless too.
Nice.
Hey,
Oh, really?
that's
Wow.
wireless mouse too, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah,
Very cool.
yeah. That's the only way to go.
Yeah.
Wow. So Wren, what type of person are you? Are you getting more or less done?
Right now, certainly a lot less. I am not adjusting well.
You just keep staring in the background at that one wheel behind you. Just think about it. Just
No,
like-
I had to it took a lot of effort to kind of clean out my spot here, and get I had to go get my work computer because my home computer just wasn't cutting it, and then setting all that up took a long time. So yeah, it's been a little hard for me to adjust, but I'm at a point now where I'm back up to 100% productivity.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm actually really impressed at how fast everyone sort of figured out their own modus operandi.
Mm-hmm.
I expected it to take a lot longer, I'll be honest. But I feel like we only lost I don't know, maybe a day of work or so.
I'd make it 2.5, but either way, the
I
point.
mean, I don't know. We still
Never
put out
mind.
a lot of videos.
I know we're still putting out stuff. I feel like we're getting it all done,
Yeah.
delivering cuts. Yeah, I
We
think
still have yet to miss a single Saturday of a React episode
That's
in the
true.
almost year that we've been doing it, even in spite of a pandemic forcing us into our own homes.
Speaking of which,
Yeah. About
Yeah.
that.
about that.
Can we talk about why we're all doing this in the first place?
Yeah. So, it's
COVID-19.
pretty crazy how everybody's reacting to it differently across the country. Because right now in New York, you have 5% of the entire world's cases in New York right now of COVID-19. And part of it, I think, is because they've actually been actively testing everybody. So they have actually a pretty good handle on everyone who actually has it. A good rule of thumb, so if you're looking at numbers, right? A good rule of thumb is that the death rate is 1% of the infection rate. And realistically, it's probably even a little bit lower than 1%. But if somebody reports having 100 deaths and they only have 1,000 cases, that tells you that there's actually 9,000 undocumented cases running around, you know? So that's like one of the things, like you'll see states that report like, oh, we have 50 deaths and we only have 1,000 documented cases. And that's a sign that there are so many thousands of people that have coronavirus that haven't been tested in those states. So I think
how many people do you think that is? Like just rough guess based on what you've seen so far. Like how many people have it and have been documented and recorded as having it versus how many people actually have it?
So right now in the United States, there's 53,000 documented cases and there's 684 deaths. Now, granted, those cases haven't necessarily run their course, but overall in the United States total, we're getting closer and closer. Like if you just go by the numbers, we should probably be at about 75,000 cases for 684 deaths, if not more cases. You know, like so if you look at New York, they have 25,600 cases as of this moment and 210 total deaths. So they're at about that 1% that we were talking about. But if you look at, I'm on worldometers.com or .info.
There's 650 people that have died, and we're estimating there's 75,000 cases.
Yeah, I'd say in the United States.
You're talking about 0.85%.
Yes, mortality rate.
Is the death toll? Gotcha.
Still, that's that number higher than the flu.
It's way higher. The flu is below 0.1%.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess the flu's been around for so long that we've got pretty good information on that.
Yeah.
Also, the doubling rates is every 2 days.
Yes.
Roughly. Like almost exactly.
Every infected person with COVID-19 on average infects 2.5 more people right now. And as long as that number stays above 1, you will continuously see an exponential growth. But real quick, Michigan, for example, has 1,700 documented cases. And they have total deaths of 24. So they're a little bit underreporting. But Washington's a big one. So Washington right now only has 2,000 documented cases and 110 deaths. So what does that tell you about how many cases are actually in Washington right now? You know?
Yeah, there's got to be way more.
Yeah, and that's just because we haven't ramped up testing. But already people aren't taking it seriously. Like you go out in Hunter Street and like half the businesses still have people coming and going. And it's just like, it's worrying. It's really worrying. It seems like, you know, this whole discussion of liberty, right? Like we are a free country. We don't have a dictator that can just come and tell everybody to stay in their house. But with that privilege of that freedom and that responsibility comes with the responsibility of being informed and making the right call at the right time. And so many people have shuffled off that responsibility of being informed and, you know, having some sense of civic duty and just have entirely invested themselves in like, well, whatever, it's not going to affect me, so I'm going to go do whatever I want. And I personally find that very, very frustrating. And I know there's a balance between like, you know, the economic impact of this versus like the death toll. But right now, when you're in like the first week or 2 weeks of this, it's like now's not the time to be like, well, it's just too inconvenient for me. So I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts on this.
No, I know you've been thinking about it a lot, and I don't disagree generally. I do think there is a. You're right. With that freedom comes the responsibility to know what to do and when to do it, and to keep yourself informed. That's how vibrant democracy works. So there's that. People can't, but you know, there's always going to be the idiots out there who are just like, well, it's not going to affect me, so whatever. And that's obviously not the right way to go about it. But you're right. There is this looming economic storm that has very quickly been created from this. Like
this has also been this has also been a really interesting case study in denial. You know, it's like every single person in the world right now is coming to terms with this at different rates. Mm-hmm. So it's, you know, like some people are looking at the math and accepting it before anyone else has even heard of the virus. Other people are hearing all these studies or you know, all the news and whatnot, and they just straight up don't believe it. Two opposite ends of the spectrum there. everyone else is within that spectrum somewhere. And you know, like I have friends who are like, it's not a big deal. Like it's not going to be that big of a thing. But the entire theme of all of this is that it continues to be a bigger thing than everyone guessed it would be. So it's like,
yeah, well, if less than say the assumption is like 0.75% of people that get it die.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's 350 million people that live in the United States, so you're talking about 3.2 million people.
Which is a lot of people.
There's a very important caveat to that, and that is the assumption that the healthcare system hasn't collapsed.
Yeah, you only hit the 0.7% when you have enough hospital beds and ventilators for people.
That's with us successfully flattening the curve, as they say. If we don't flatten the curve, and they're starting to have to decide who lives and who dies, more and more people are going to die. It's like
that's when you get to the 3 to 4%, which is happening in Italy. You know, that's when 30-year-olds and 20-year-olds die of pneumonia. Because if you get pneumonia, that's deadly. We just take it for granted in this day and age that it's something that you can cure it with some antibiotics, and you go to the hospital if you need to.
Right.
Like we've totally taken that for granted because we've all honestly been pretty lucky to live in the society that we live in. And then suddenly imagine hospitals disappearing, not just for you, but for everyone. If you get in a car accident, you're screwed. You get a heart attack, you're screwed. You get sick, you're screwed. Nobody gets to go to the hospital. Like that's what you're looking at.
Yeah, and you can't get those antibiotics and all those things that you need to cure that disease.
Exactly.
Right. So it would have this sort of offset of like additional deaths and associated incidents that would cause additional damage.
Yeah, if everybody gets sick at the same time, if you let it grow exponentially, like if you don't, like they say, flatten the curve.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that's also assuming that like the doctors and nurses aren't getting sick either. So it's like the line that we're trying to flatten the curve underneath is also variable in and of itself.
And then there's the whole point of mutation, but we'll get to that in a second.
How does that happen? How do you flatten? Curve?
So remember I said on average 2.5 people get infected for each person that gets coronavirus. What you need to do is you need to get that value below 1. That's how you flatten the curve. So when that value is above 1, the curve becomes sharper and sharper and sharper. When that value is below 1, the curve becomes flatter and flatter and flatter. So what we need to have happen is for everybody that gets coronavirus, they need to infect less than 1 person on average to get that curve to flatten. And the only way for that to happen is for people to stop getting each other sick. And you can stop getting each other sick by stopping going out and talking to random people, coughing on random people, shaking hands with random people, giving hugs.
My favorite activities, coughing on strangers.
So is the actual problem that people that are showing symptoms aren't staying at home?
Well, so that's a hard thing is you don't show symptoms for the first like 4 days to 5 days that you have this.
But are you infecting people at that point?
Yes, you're contagious at that point. So you're shedding the virus for those first 4 to 5 days to everybody that you're coming into contact with.
Potentially upwards of 10.
That's true. And some people don't show any symptoms. So for the entire run of the infection, Milo's freaking out over these facts. for the entire run of the infection, you're contagious and you don't even know that you have it. And so for those 10 days or 14 days, you've just been blah, blah, licking your hands and touching everybody. It's pretty crazy.
So what's the idea behind this kind of 2-week period? How does this help stop things? Because obviously as we get later, we have to talk about like how long are people really supposed to stay closed, but what does this initial 2-week period really do to benefit us?
Yeah. Take it, Wren.
So the idea is that if you know for a fact, if you have a few different controls, for instance, if you know that you have not interacted with a single person or a single object outside of your vicinity and you've been in quarantine for 10 days, you know for a fact that you are not sick. And so all of this 2-week thing, this 3-week thing is just to weed out, to identify everyone who's not sick and is already sick. It's just you're trying to find who's already sick so you can like laser focus on them to be completely quarantined. And then when, let's say you have a group of friends and every single one of you managed to be in complete isolation, reasonably so, for 10 days or more, then that all of you are not sick, and now you can hang out with each other as long as you are not still hanging out with anyone else. It's like it becomes a very exclusive club where, you know, if you and your
I can hear you.
Sorry, my computer just like completely crashed on me for a moment.
All right.
Like all my monitors went out. I was like, uh-oh. Okay. Yeah. So it's like, if you and your friend have both been in isolation for long enough, you can now hang out with each other because you're reasonably reliably not sick. Both of you know that.
Mhm.
But you have to maintain the social isolation from everyone else still, because someone else can still get you sick. That's where it's a little bit of a challenge for me, because Jenna could be sick at any moment.
Gotcha.
Right.
So if
And-
you
and
do
not know
have it, so if you do have it, you will eventually show symptoms after or within that 2-week period.
Yeah.
Like, there's no not feeling symptoms at all, but still having it and contracting it.
There's, I mean, like half of cases, I don't even know the exact number, but most cases are mild. So you might not realize you're showing symptoms, but you are.
So
If that
that's
makes
so that's
sense.
so that's the thing. So I'm saying after the 2 weeks, say maybe they're minor and I don't think it's any more than just a slightly runny nose, but I don't feel sick at all. But 2 weeks is up and I'm still feeling fine. I'm then, so I guess
You
this
can
2 week,
you can
but I
say
can
that
go
you're not sick. That's
not
pretty
sick,
reasonable.
but then I guess even past the 2-week period, at any point I can get infected and then infect more people. So how
Well,
you know,
not
how long can we
necessarily.
keep up this quarantine thing or in that kind of stuff? Like even after the 2-week period, how do we continue going on about
Well,
our
it's not
normal
like you're
lives?
going back to normal daily life. That daily life is on hold for a very long time,
Wow.
and that's the
Okay.
unfortunate truth.
Yeah.
We like if everyone, it's like playing the perfect game of telephone. When like you say information to someone's ear and then they transfer on that information. You go down the line, and if what the person at the end gets, the thing about that thing is that that game never works. The end of the line always has something different. But assuming you could get something perfect out of that, and comparing that to say like everyone in isolation, you can now say that you're not sick, but you still have to maintain strict discipline of not going out to crowded areas. You still have to be isolated from everyone else.
Gotcha. So what you're saying is that after this 2-week period, no one from corridor gets sick or shows symptoms. We're good with, we say we resume work. We still kind of have to basically keep the social distancing and also trust that each other is not, going to all those third-party possibilities of getting infected and
Yeah.
spreading more. So
Yeah.
even if we do decide to go back to work after this 2-week period and everybody feels clear, we have to basically still keep this limited within our group.
Yeah.
Go to raves, share drinks, go to malls.
Yeah.
And we
You
have to hope
know.
that everybody else does the same thing. But actually, another big important thing too is that the idea is that these 2 weeks, by the leadership, hopefully in the healthcare system, time to get the testing set up and start doing, aggressive tracing of people that have it and who they've come into contact with. Because right now, South Korea doesn't have things shut down. South Korea still has functioning restaurants and a public transportation system. Like, life's normal in South Korea, and they were hit, just like we were. But what they did to get over it was a really extensive testing. They tested everybody, so they figured out who had it and who didn't. And the people who then had it, like, they very extensively traced everybody they came into contact with, which honestly people in America probably are going to get kind of iffy about, like we're pretty anti-authority out here, but like, yeah, it's
the hardest part.
But can
So-
it's like, can we deal with that? Can we like stop being babies for a moment and like deal with the real problem?
So Korea's
this
going
is
up on the way back up
This is
after that.
Yeah. What were you saying, Jake?
It's
That's
also
tough.
important to note that Korea jumped on it immediately.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. And so because they did that, they're actually on the curve back up, I guess, and now they're back open and things are kind of moving.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what
Yep.
you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
So this is beyond. This is, I think, this is like bigger than a lot of people think it is in
Yes.
a lot of ways. Not just necessarily in like the whole mortality rate, which obviously has its own risk factors, but there's a couple other things going on here. One, it's a huge test of our economy and whether our government is capable of creating an adequate response
Mm-hmm.
to like keep people employed, not necessarily like by the government, obviously, but the government propping up the businesses that have to take hits
Yeah.
because of this, undoubtedly. And then secondarily, like a test of your individual autonomy in a democracy such as the United States, where we're not going to have the government go probably and knock on every door and say, you're locked down, you're locked down, you're locked down, because that's not how we function. But at the same time, you're right, Niko. It's on the sovereignty of each individual to be like, hey, what's my responsibility in this?
Yeah.
And if we can all do that, then supply chains can stay in effect, businesses can get through this, and then everyone can move on with their lives. But all of those things have to function together. One thing that I have noticed is, have you noticed how nobody is talking about petty things anymore on the internet?
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd agree.
Like that has just gone away.
Oh, did you guys hear how apparently the tape that Kim Kardashian leaked about Taylor Swift was actually a lie? Turns out she was
Exactly.
telling the truth the
Dude,
whole
I haven't
time.
heard any of that stuff. I'm so
Yeah.
out of it.
Like that seems just so, I mean, that seems to me like so uncouth at the moment to like
Yeah. It is.
to be
It's-
talking about that
I
stuff.
think people are realizing that that stuff's not really important. I mean, we're all dealing with the virus now worldwide, so things like a Kardashian headline is less important about getting some information about how we get through this.
A million
No, it wasn't
people
until
lost their
Kim
job in a
Kardashian
single
got
day.
Coronavirus that I started realizing it could happen to anyone.
I mean, that's one of the funniest things, like the mental leaps that people go through. It's like everybody's told, you should have an emergency fund. I know not everybody can afford one, so I'm not speaking to the people that are, in that situation. But if you're making money, you've been making money for, a couple of years, ideally you've set aside a little bit to just have some savings, And the whole idea is you should have an emergency fund because at some point in your life, you might have an emergency. You might be out of work for 2 or 3 weeks. And a lot of people are like, I don't need one of those. I won't get hit with an emergency. And then everyone got hit with an emergency. The entire world got hit with an emergency. And people are still now going in with like, yeah, but I probably won't get sick. It's like, you just got hit with that emergency that you thought would never happen to you. And now you're still applying this mentality of like, but it still probably won't happen to me. It's like, but it just happened to you. Like, things happen. Life happens. You need to be a little bit prepared for the potholes because life isn't always smooth.
So
And,
let me
yeah.
double up on that statement, because now, okay, like what's your responsibility as, well, an employer, right, to people?
Yeah, I mean, I believe your responsibility as an employer is to help your employees get through something like this. Like, well, for one, ideally the leadership and then the people that can help with something like this. And this is tricky because I don't like talking about stuff that's in other people's hands when it comes to like, issues. I like to think about what I can do, but like ideally the leadership takes this time to get ready to then solve the problem once everybody's done with the self-isolation. And like, yeah, we can continue.
Like tax cuts for the rich corporations.
Like we can continue, let's say corridor resumes in 2 weeks, right? We can go to corridor. We can make a point of, keeping our distance, washing our hands, wear your masks. If you feel anything at all, wear a mask, etc. It's like, be responsible. Don't go to big groups, etc. Like, we can take those steps, and with those steps, we will continue to mitigate that curve, that exponential growth. But like, I believe your job as an employer is to, ideally help people through this. Like, yeah, you could make a buck by laying off your employees for 2 weeks and then rehiring everybody, but that's unless your business is literally on that verge of failing where your cash flow can't handle a 2-week bump, which once again, you're still in the same situation as anybody else who doesn't have an emergency fund, so that's an irresponsible business owner. You should do the right thing and not try to make an extra buck here. Like, yeah, sure, people might not be coming in for like 2 weeks here, but like, don't throw them out in the street. But this comes down to that whole civic duty again. It's like, once again, we're not in a dictatorship because we believe that that individuals in this country should have the knowledge and the intelligence and the education to not just shit on each other, and like help each other out when it matters and have civic duty when it matters. Like, we have this belief that people have that amount of responsibility. And I believe it's true. I believe people can pull that off. Otherwise, mankind would have never made it through one of the hundreds of, very threatening things we've been in, everything from the world wars to various depressions to, all that kind of stuff. People do, I believe, band together, but I guess we haven't really been faced with a crisis since maybe 2008. And even then, I'd argue that 2008 is not as big of a crisis as people talk about it as. Like, it was an economic issue, it's an economic crisis, but it was nothing like a world war. You didn't have millions of people dying. It's been a long time since, like, as a whole, our population has had to face a real crisis that requires all millions of us, all 300 million of us here in America, for example, to band together and do something about it. And because of that, you've had people that, that's when people start complaining about Kim Kardashian. Because I have a core belief that people need a cause, and when there isn't really any baddie to fight, there's no enemy to crush. Like, people start looking for something, they need something to fight and be outraged about, and that's why you have so much outrage culture on the internet right now. Is because shit's good or was good. It's like, yeah, life's been good.
That's not just a belief. That's a truth, man. Like, that's people. We've evolved to create our little pockets and to be unified in those pockets and to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we've evolved, like, mentally and physically and biologically and socially.
Mm-hmm.
So that's absolutely true. The thing that I think is interesting as well, to go off one of the things you were saying, is like, yeah, you could make a buck in the short term if you're a kind of business, and you can say, okay, guys, no one's going to get paid for X amount of time. And, we have the luxury of being an online business primarily. So
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to be as hard hit immediately by this as, like, say, a physical manufacturing non-essential business.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But, like, even if you think that you're winning in the short term, if everybody else does that, and then all of a sudden there's layoffs, and then all this, like, that eventually comes back around you, because the economy is an ecosystem.
Yeah.
And if one part of the ecosystem is affected, it'll affect two others, and so on and so forth, until it gets back around to you. And I have no doubt that even though in a time where more people are staying home, even beyond the initial, like, self-isolation quarantine thing, we're still going to see a hit probably in AdSense and things like that, because now companies that were out there spending money are not out there spending money anymore. Mm-hmm. And eventually that's going to come around to us as well. And I think we're probably on, like, at least a quarterly delay on that.
Yeah.
Because ad money is spent quarterly, but still I feel like that's going to happen, and hopefully viewership will go up a little bit because more people are staying at home, and that'll offset some of the loss in AdSense. But at the same time, like, yeah, you have to think about this as in, like, if your neighbor is working for an airline company, and an airline company goes under, that's going to affect you. Mm-hmm. At a certain point. Yeah. It might not affect you tomorrow, but in a few weeks, in a few months, it will.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, being, I guess I've always tried to, knowing that Corridor is like a public-facing company where, we have cameras in our office and, record the stuff that we do. Like, I've always tried to at least set the example for how I hope other people would run their business. Just trying to be public with it. Like, this is what we do. Like, we'll make the changes, we'll make the adjustments. And yeah, it's easier for us to work from home than, say, somebody who works at McDonald's. You can't make McDonald's burgers from home. But, like, at the same time, it'd obviously be easier for us to be in the office filming with each other. Like, we're not in the podcast studio right now recording this. We had to spend the half hour doing all the tech troubleshooting to get this up and running that we don't have to spend if we would have just done this in the studio.
So how do you feel about companies like Walmart and McDonald's who do not have paid sick leave?
I mean, I think it's crappy. I think it's not treating people correctly. I think there's a balance, obviously, with everything. Like, there's a cash flow for these restaurants, fast food places, make a certain amount of money every month, and so on and so forth. And obviously, if your expenses are more than your income, then you go bankrupt, and that's the end of that. And goodbye to your business. Like, so there is obviously a balance, but, like, at least here at Corridor, we try to have, a certain amount of runway. So if for some reason all ad money just stopped coming in, we'd have a little period of time here to, like, figure something out. And that's responsible
Yeah.
business ownership, you know. It's and yes, not every business has that luxury. I totally get that. Once again, I'm not talking about the exceptions. I'm not talking about the small isolated cases. I'm talking about general, you know, workflow, general business, general lifestyle, etc. So yeah, it's.
But it will be. I mean, it's going to be on the government at some point to come up with some sort of stimulus for this, because
Yeah,
I
but
don't know what else you do. They're really the only entity that's existent, at least in our society, um, that can prop something up like this. I was listening to a guy on CNBC this morning, and he was talking about how he thinks that this is going to be a $10 trillion bridge to the other side.
I don't know. I mean, that might be a little sensationalism, but who knows? Like, it just comes down to people like you and me, you know, all of us here, people listening to this. It comes down to whether or not we can stop the virus from spreading. Like, and people have done it. Other countries have done it. South Korea's already done it. They've fixed it. They're done. Like, they got through it without having to spend $10 trillion. So are we smart enough to do this without spending $10 trillion, or are we
The
going
problem
to?
with that comparison, though, Nico, is that because I mentioned earlier, like they got onto it like right away when they only had like a few hundred cases, they were already shutting things down. Same with Japan, you know, they shut down their schools like immediately. We went 6.5, 7 weeks before making any sort of action, and in that time, it was doubling every 2 days. And it's like they're even now that we are like starting to like take these measures to like stop the spread. There's already going to be an economic impact just because of what the time that it took for us to take action.
True. I don't think we're at the $10 trillion mark yet. You know, and honestly, I don't think we're at the like $2 trillion mark yet. It comes down to what happens in the next month. 2 weeks, like 2 weeks of everything just stopping, that's not the end of the world. People can start up again from 2 weeks. 3 months of everything stopping, that gets pretty messy. You know, and obviously in between there's a gradient. But like, that's the thing is, at least right now is not the time to be like, oh, I can't do it. It's like, we're gonna have to be doing this for more than 5 days. Like, we're only 5 days into like our, you know, or 6 days into our quarantine. Like, it's gonna be hard. It's gonna take time. But if you do it now, it's better than doing it later. So, you know, it's short term versus long term rewards and everything.
Even when we go back, though, like even when we go back to working in groups and stuff, we're gonna have to be maintaining still the same protocols. Like right now, you know, at home, we're only going to like, you know, Wendy's going to the grocery store and she's getting what she needs, and then she's coming back and we're leaving the kids here and stuff, and it's just kind of one person at a time. That's gonna have to probably go on for months, I think.
Yeah, once again, it comes down to, do we have enough? America's a rich country. Like, are we going to put our resources into having people doing lots of testing and tracing down people who have it and who they've been exposed to, and finding those people and, you know, asking them to be in quarantine? You know, one of the things they do in Singapore that they did before the coronavirus outbreak is sometimes in certain buildings they would take your temperature. You'd walk inside and they'd have a dude with like a little thermometer with like one of those like, you know, replaceable ear things, and they'd take your temperature. And if you showed that you had a fever, like for any reason, you couldn't go into the building. And that's an example of one of the things here that you could implement to keep people safe and get through this. But are people going to put up with a 2-second inconvenience of having somebody put something in your ear? Like, I don't know. Some people won't, and it's disappointing that that's the case. But that's what happens when you don't really have any sort of thing like this ever have happened before to bond people together and establish it in your culture, which is what has happened in, you know, Japan and South Korea and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, we'll probably pay the price of 1 million people dead, and we'll figure it out from there, because that's just kind of how human beings work. But that's a little pessimistic. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's
harsh reality.
It could be a reality too, though.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the ideas being thrown around right now of giving every American $1,000 or more, 2,000?
I mean, it's a decent way to get through some of this, but like, you know, it's in conjunction with companies that also make billions of dollars. They should be doing their part and also supporting people. I think people misplace a little bit of responsibility on the federal government. Like, why isn't the president doing anything about this? It's like, well, the president isn't in charge of your city and he's not in charge of your state, because that's just how the U.S. government is structured. It's on your city's government and your state's government to honestly deal with this. And we have 50 different states that are going to all handle it slightly different ways. And the federal government certainly plays a part in it. But like, even just leadership of, if you have health insurance, who's your health insurance provider? Like, where's their leadership in this? Why are they not sending you emails saying this is where you go to get tested? Because they're the companies that should be handling this. And it's just as much like, don't just blame the president because he's a reality TV show guy that's easy to hate. Like, look to the people that should be in charge of these things and expect them to step up to the plate. Your health insurance company should be stepping up to the plate. Your doctor's office needs to step up to the plate, and they usually do, but like, they're the health professionals. You need to look to them. Companies like Walmart, if they employ millions of people, they need to step up to the plate too. They can't just fire everybody and let it be somebody else's problem. These companies all have social responsibilities. Everybody has social responsibilities. I do, you do. Like, we all do as individuals in a society. We have social responsibilities. So yeah, it's got to be something where people make the sacrifices and come together to get through something like this. And the better we handle it now, the less the impact is. So yeah.
So in a week is going to be April 1st, and that'll be rent day for everyone.
Yes.
And for so many people who have been unable to make money over the last couple weeks, they're not going to be able to pay rent. So another idea to help kind of solve, or not solve, but to help mitigate part of the crisis is to enact a rent freeze, where no one has to pay rent, corporations or people. Just no rent is transacted. How do you guys feel about that idea?
So how does that affect the landlords and the building owners and things like that? So that's affecting them, right? I mean,
there's a couple things to unpack there. The first there's the individual level, and then there's the business and real estate level. And so first and foremost, like the individual stimulus, right? That could be functional for a short term, as in like, here's something right now to just stopgap an immediate short-term problem. But that giving people money solution isn't a long-term solution, I don't think, by any stretch, because what the foundation of wealth and success is creating opportunities that people engage with, that then they get money in exchange for that, and they participate in those things. And so eventually you don't want the businesses to fail, because the businesses are the actual foundation of self-sovereignty and the money that you need to have that sovereignty. So I think you could do something in the short term that's like, hey guys, here everybody gets, people who need it get X amount of dollars right now. But if that's the policy going forward in the long term, I don't think that's realistic at all, because eventually who's gonna pay that back? People that work at businesses, and businesses are going to pay that back. That money is going to come back to the American Treasury through taxes, which is come through jobs, which is going to come through individuals and corporations and small businesses that are going to pay those taxes. So the bedrock of that is that you can't let that many businesses fail. And so and then the sort of underlying thing underneath that is real estate, like, because real estate is the final sort of bedrock of the economy in a way, because everybody still needs to live somewhere, and you cannot avoid that no matter what you do or where you go or how you do it. So I think you kind of need to take it in steps and like address the worst problems first, right? You have like self-quarantine. Then if you need to talk about an individual stimulus, okay, but the longer term solution is making sure that businesses aren't failing at a massive rate, both big and small. So
here's a slightly different question then. Let's say if one of those policies was to go into effect for only 1 month, let's say the month of April, which is the better option? Everyone gets $1,000, or no one has to pay rent?
Ooh, that's a good question. Those are kind of the same thing, to be honest.
But also, still very distinctly different. Everyone has different amounts of rent. Everyone has different expenses.
True, but in the big scheme of things, whether somebody pays $1,500 or somebody pays $500, like it still kind of comes out. It kind of comes out to be the same thing. But really, what it boils down to is, we're all frozen for a month, and can we?
You there, Niko?
Oh,
I could hear him. I was hearing him.
Okay, sorry.
Quarantine.
There we go.
Quarantine. Everyone's having quarantine.
Basically, yeah. All I was getting at is, I think the effect either of those would have is the same. I think giving people a bailout for a month is a good idea. You want to know what I actually would do? I would do this. If you test positive for the coronavirus and you voluntarily quarantine yourself in a facility for quarantine, you get paid. That's what I would do. I would pay people who are sick to come in and quarantine themselves for 2 weeks. Rather than
now that incentivizes people to get sick.
It's okay. I don't care. Step one, right? We're in the step one phase. If people want to get sick later, fine. We deal with take it away then. But right now, when people are spreading it, there's no social isolation. So this is one of the things that they dealt with. In China, they penalized people for breaking curfew and for breaking quarantine, and the fine was $1,000. And they went, wait a minute, let's just give them $1,000 if they voluntarily stay in quarantine for 2 weeks instead, and that totally helped. It totally switched how things worked, and people instead of feeling like prisoners,
people going in voluntarily and they're getting tested even when they're not feeling symptoms, just in the hopes that
they're going to get paid to stay in quarantine.
Yeah.
It also requires proper distribution of testing. Right now, we're not close to that.
I mean, these are all issues, 100%. But it's just that's one way you can help incentivize the social isolation and the quarantining to happen, because everybody's saying, "But my job, I gotta pay my rent." And it's yes, you do have to pay your rent, and yes, you do have your job. Also, we don't want to kill people, and there is a balance, but right now the balance should be a little bit more heavily on don't kill people. But at least in terms of that, there's a way to hey, here's a reason to isolate and to not go into work if you're sick, because hell, you can get your $1,000 or $2,000, and the 1% of people that are scumbags will try to get sick again, or try to get the coronavirus so they can get paid $1,000. But if you're that desperate, maybe it's for the better that you just go in there and get your $1,000. It's that's once again, it's an isolated case, but I do think giving people and individuals something to get them through this phase, whether it's a rent freeze or a stipend or whatever it is, I'd lean towards giving people the money rather than freezing rent.
You don't think freezing rent would be easier to implement?
No, I don't, because there's a whole lot of different ways that happens. If I give you a check for $1,000, it's a check for $1,000. Flat. That's it. It's very easy to interpret that. It's $1,000 versus it's a freeze on rent. Was that a freeze on mortgage? Well, I actually had to deal with this guy where rent was like this. I pay rent every 2 months, not 1 month, so I get 1 month off. I pay $5,000 in rent. I pay $1,000 in rent. I pay $200 in rent. It's all over the place for the rent freeze thing. And there's the fact
that all goes through banks eventually.
Yeah, and honestly, right now,
I think that you're avoiding the corruption of giving the big corporations the money. But all that money goes back to those big corporations in the form of banks. So
yeah, besides, not everybody has to pay rent either, so you might as well help those people as well. What about the people that have their house paid off, but they're still obviously having to pay their property taxes and make other ends meet? They're in financial trouble too. So I think the first step is, the bailout is good, but the other thing too is that when you start messing with the economy and you start artificially inflating or deflating certain parts of the economy or manipulating supply and demand, you very quickly end up breaking stuff. And it's one thing to give everybody that money bump in their account to get them through a lurch. It's another thing to start telling people you can't collect checks and you can't collect checks, but you can collect checks, but you can't collect checks. You guys are in a gray area. We don't have enough bureaucracy to deal with you guys yet. So you're in a line. We'll talk to you in a month. That's when you start breaking the whole economy around real estate and rental and all that kind of stuff. Versus just like I said, writing checks and deal with it in a couple weeks and figure out the next step.
It's you got to also look at what is the government good at and what is the government bad at. and certainly like they're a lot better at writing checks in a very mass produced manner than they are at like isolating and individualizing like corporations and trying to manage that when the corporations have literally been built to be efficient at that, and now there's an entity stepping in and telling them to do it differently.
Not to mention, there's a freeze on evictions too. So even if you couldn't pay your rent, what's your landlord going to do? Kick you? Like they can't kick you out. So, and then like, and if they do, like, landlords are businesses too. So it's like, let's say you're in the middle of quarantine, the coronavirus is running everywhere. Landlord can't take other people in and show them the apartment. Like, you know, it's like they're better off just eating it for a month, just like everybody else in the freaking world has to. And then you can pick it up from where you left off, you know?
Yeah, I got a handful of friends that have to put their move or their, next place on hold because no one's showing places, and it's a real thing for sure.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's get in more into the nitty gritty. All right.
All right.
So there was a recent bill that was proposed that failed. That apparently, correct me if I'm wrong here, but apparently this bill was attempting to create, I think it was something like $2 trillion of stimulus. So already we're at that two trillion mark.
Yeah, though that number gets played up a little bit by the press, a little bit, because a lot of that money is just the government offering to so the government like buys bonds back from like that's issued all the time, and this is just them saying, oh, usually we only buy them back on these deadlines, but we'll just do it all now if you want, in case you need the money. If you're holding one of these bonds, we'll just buy it back now, when in reality you'd have to wait like the 2 years, but we'll just do it now if you want. And like that's they're doing like 500 billion or like whatever, it's a huge amount of money of this, but in reality they do like 30 to 50 billion of that every day. Like that's just how the money flows. So people like to throw that into the headline to make it sound like $2 trillion stimulus package, when in reality it's not quite that. It's more nuanced than that, but it doesn't
but regardless, the basic core tenets, if I understand them correctly, of this bill were to give loans to small businesses that wouldn't have to pay those back, and then to also give loans to big businesses that would eventually have to pay those back. And that was shot down from the way that I understand it.
Yeah, I think they need to be careful with that. It's really easy to get taken advantage of as a taxpayer in the United States because you don't have people lobbying for you in the government. And so I think it's the stimulus thing isn't something that needs to happen today. The stimulus thing can happen in a couple days. It can happen in a week. It can happen in 2 weeks, honestly. Like, it doesn't need to happen immediately. I think it's more important to do that right because the economic impact of it is gnarly.
Much longer.
Yeah. The important thing right now is to stop the virus spreading exponentially. Because literally, if you can slow the curve down a little bit, it's a difference. Like, for example, let's say it's doubling every 2 days. Well, if you're at 40,000 cases in one day, and then 2 days later you're at 80,000 cases, and let's say you're already at capacity with the 40,000 cases, like that's now 40,000 new people that are sick and can't go see the doctor. That's a lot of people to get sick in like a day or 2 days. But if you can stem that just even a day, that's another day before your hospitals get overwhelmed. It's another day to get testing out there. It's another day to get things figured out. And like literally buying us a day like is super valuable when you're dealing with exponential increase, because a day makes all the difference in the world. A day is the difference between 1 million and 2 million people once you're further down that curve. Like that's a lot of people. Like the problem is you get to numbers that are so big that they become abstracted. Like, I mean, I see people arguing like, oh, 40,000 people die in car accidents each year, so what's another 40,000, to this coronavirus? It's just like car accidents. It's like, that's 40,000 people. Like, it's a big deal if somebody shoots 20 people at a freaking nightclub. Like, that's a horrible, like, catastrophe, and everybody's saying, we need to, take guns away and all that kind of stuff. Like, everybody gets worked up about 30 people getting shot. But 40,000 people dying to the coronavirus, and people are like, it's just like car accidents. It's just like the flu. The flu kills 15,000, 20,000 people every year. What's another 40,000? It's just like 2 flus. It's like, It's weird. It's weird how people work. It's once the numbers get
now
too
people
big.
are floating out the idea that old people should just accept their fate and die so that
I
we can move
know.
on as an economy. That's dark
Like,
as hell.
what the hell is
That's
wrong
terrible.
with
Yeah,
people?
People not have grandparents.
That's
and
coming
parents.
from people that don't realize that they'll one day.
Yeah. It's coming from people that don't realize that they'll be old one day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean,
My grandpa had to go to the hospital yesterday for a complication not related to the coronavirus, and it was like, is he going to be able to get the care he needs? Fortunately, they were able to perform tests and get him out of the hospital very quickly to reduce his exposure to the hospital. So
That's
Yeah.
great.
he's fine. So hopefully we'll hear back in a day or two what's wrong with him. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough stuff.
like
Yeah.
Niko was saying, this is not a good time to go to the hospital.
No.
Actually, now's a okay time in everywhere except for New York City in America. Next week
things, Niko.
might not be the case.
I heard you tell me the other day that it sounds like the exponential rate of cases is going down. Is that where did you get that?
So
Where did that? What was that?
I've been looking at worldometers.info. It tracks basically all the cases in the world, but specifically I've been looking at the United States and, of course, California and New York to some extent, because New York has a ton of cases right now.
Yeah, they've got 25,000 cases now.
Yeah, 5,000 new ones today. 1/5 of their
Yeah.
entire cases were diagnosed today. And I'm sure by the time people listen to this podcast, it's going to be up another 10,000.
Tomorrow.
Crazy.
When is this podcast going up?
Probably
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
we can.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll get it up tomorrow.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So,
Or
worldometers.
today, if you're listening, it went up today.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
we can-
hey.
So worldometers has graphs of different things, and one of these graphs here is the daily cases. Which, let's see if my webcam can adjust. There you go. So you'll notice, however, and this might be due to people becoming aware of the virus, which would be wonderful if this is how it's working. You'll notice that the number of cases today versus yesterday, not that big of a jump. Now the day to the day before, a huge jump.
Yeah, huge.
Yeah, so it's been following the exponential curve except for this past day, but it's just a day. It's just one data point. It could be an outlier. Just give it 5
there's so
days.
many factors.
Yeah.
You have to do a best fit curve sort of scenario. It's like
Yeah.
Sure.
No, give it
So
5
we
days.
really don't know yet, because if you average it out, it's still exponential.
Yeah, and it's,
well, we know it's still going up. We know that much.
yeah, it's still going
Well,
up.
if you look at
But the
all
exponential
data
rate
points
itself.
on that, though, yeah.
Yeah.
As
yeah.
long as the rate of infection is over 1. If every person who gets the coronavirus infects 1.000001 people, you're still going to hit an exponential curve. It's just going to take a little while longer. It's still going to spike up to a point where you're getting 1 million new cases a day. You need to get that rate below 1. It needs to be, even if it's 0.999, it just needs to get below 1, and your curve will stop being exponential.
So I feel like, as a person who lives in a family group,
Mhm.
I feel like that's damn near impossible if one of the people in this house gets infected.
Right. So that's the thing, is one of the issues, and when they've solved this once again in South Korea, the issues here in America is that people who are sick have to stay home, and then you end up getting your whole family sick, and that's not good. Whereas if we had our shit together as a country, when you get sick, you go to a place and you spend your quarantine at a place isolated from other people. That's one of the reasons why they're starting to take over hotels and get them ready for this kind of thing, is because when people get sick, they need to not be at their house with the rest of their family. Right now, we're caught so off guard and no one's done any work on this. So if you get sick, it's like, go home and hopefully you don't get the rest of your family sick, but it's probably going to happen. So all you guys just have to deal with it, and hopefully your grandma doesn't die. Like, that's what we're looking at right now. And people are still going out and hanging out with their buddies because it's not going to happen to them.
Jen and I have a plan. So it's like the moment one of us starts showing symptoms, that person is going to sleep in the other bedroom.
Yep, I have my plan too.
It's
and
like,
if I start
There's still
symptoms,
a high risk that we're gonna get sick if one of us gets sick, but like at least by doing that, it helps mitigate it.
yeah,
On top of okay, now we know for a fact that we got to start like sanitizing everything even harder internally within the home, because right now we're in a bit of a safety bubble at home because we're not going anywhere.
yeah.
It's like I haven't washed my hands in the last hour because I haven't left my desk in the last hour.
Wren! Wren!
Dude, wash your hands right now.
Speaking of washing your hands, that reminds me of one more thing, and Ren, you can speak to this if you want to, but so mutation, right? So generally the idea is that if you get the disease, you can't get it again. Well, you can get it again if it's a different mutation of it. So that's why people can still get the flu year after year, is because the flu is mutating. In order to mutate, the disease has to infect people. So if you're infecting 1 million people, that's 1 million chances of mutation. If you're infecting only 1,000 people, that's only 1,000 chances of mutation. So obviously the more people infected means the more mutation. Now, if we want to get a vaccine for this disease, we need to not have it mutate. The way to not have it mutate is to not have it infect 5 million people before you can develop the vaccine. So another reason to stay inside your freaking house. Don't interact with other people unless you have to for some reason to get your food or whatever. Like, isolate yourselves. If somebody else isn't isolating themselves, put pressure on them. Tell them that they are doing an irresponsible thing. Tell people that they need to be safe. They need to stop socializing with everybody for a couple weeks here, and we need to get ahead of this curve. It's important that we all do our part. And it's not just being isolated, it's also telling your friends to be isolated. It's helping to educate people. It's making sure everybody understands that we are on the cusp of either having millions dead or a couple thousand dead. And that is entirely based on these next couple weeks and how people act.
Yeah. In the extreme early days of this, so like a week ago, when I was under the impression that, like, all right, what if I just get sick now? Like, assuming I could live and be fine after that, then I'm inoculated. I won't get sick again. And obviously, I'd still take precautions not to infect anyone else. I was thinking that would be a good idea. But then I started hearing cases of people getting sick a second time. Now, since then, I've started hearing kind of conflicting reports. Maybe they weren't getting sick or they were getting pneumonia instead because their immune system was trashed after this. It's hard to say, but I've also read that apparently the rate of mutation is not that fast for COVID. So that's a good thing.
Well, actually, it's an RNA-based virus, so its rate of mutation is 100 times that of a DNA-based virus. So it's still somewhat up there. It's not as fast as influenza, but because it's not influenza, and that's the other thing. It's not the flu. Everybody talks about it like it's just a flu. It's not the flu. But yeah, thankfully it's not.
It is from a subset of a flu, isn't it? I mean, it is.
I think the flu is also technically a coronavirus, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
but that's just like the type of like virus. I can't speak to that too closely. I'm not,
Jenna, tell us.
Wren, do you mind asking Jenna? So for those of you that don't know, Wren's wife is a nurse. And
Hi,
she
Jenna.
currently works at a hospital here in LA.
I'm gonna take care.
So Jenna, our question for you is, people say like, this is just the flu. Like, is it a flu? Is it a relative of the flu? What, like, does this bear any resemblance?
So there's the common coronavirus, which is actually something we test for in our hospital, which is like a cold. And then there's this coronavirus, which is like, everyone's different, because I thought the same thing when I first heard about it. I'm like, it's just the flu, like maybe the flu on steroids. Everyone's affected differently. I think you guys talked about it, how it can be mild symptoms for some people, but the people who get it bad, it's super bad. Like, it's basically seems to be, from what I've seen in cases, like respiratory failure, and even in young people. So it
can affect it can either develop into pneumonia, right? Or it can affect
like
you can have organ failure.
Cells, basically, is kind of what, like, it's eating your lungs is kind of how people described it.
Yeah, that's not good.
That's pre-pneumonia? That's not pneumonia?
So pneumonia is like junk. So at the bottom of your lungs, are what's called alveoli. So like these little like things that help with gas exchange. They look like that. So that's where gas exchange occurs. And so like when you inhale, you get your oxygen. That's how it's transferred to your blood, is through those little alveoli.
Okay.
When you have pneumonia, you have junk in your lungs that's kind of hanging out on top of that, so that their gas exchange isn't adequate. And that's why it's like shortness of breath and coughing. So like when people are coughing with pneumonia and stuff's coming out, that's good, because it's that junk that's in their lungs and is preventing that gas exchange.
So this isn't a flu. This isn't influenza time,
No. Just through the fact that, because it's called coronavirus, it's not an influenza. So it has similar symptoms because I don't know if you guys have seen the charts that are like, these are the symptoms of corona, these are the symptoms of flu, these are the symptoms of like a common cold, and these are the symptoms of allergies. So it just checks the boxes of like coughing, fever, diarrhea is a new one. So it's like, toilet paper, that sort of thing. So corona and toilet paper was not great.
So how is the virus related though? Like at like the actual like family level? Because like the Spanish flu, H1N1.
It's an influenza. That's like the type of virus where this is coronavirus.
Yeah, I guess now we're starting to get into like really technical detail that I know nothing about.
Yeah.
That's the blanket family that it's in still.
Yeah, and like the test for it is called like SARS corona type thing. So that's what we're sending out. So it's kind of more related to SARS than flu.
And SARS was a big deal in Asia, at least, 18 years ago.
It was, but it was one of those things where it's like it didn't seem to be as infectious as it did. Like it killed a lot of people, but it didn't infect as many people.
Right.
It's tough stuff. It's thanks for sharing that information with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jenna.
Thank you, Jenna. So, with all that information, it's kind of a gloomy podcast, but I think it's important to put this information out there. And you know what, guys? Let's make knowledge more viral than the coronavirus.
Dang, Niko.
Let's make knowledge more viral than the coronavirus.
Hashtag woke.
I like it.
Share information, share knowledge. Tell people. Spread the knowledge faster than the virus.
Couple big things.
Shall we end this podcast on a lighter note?
Yes.
It
Are
begins
you about
with
to talk about Half-Life? Because I got one more thing.
Wait.
with the letter X.
Jake's got another.
All right, well,
I got
Jake,
a little-
speed round on
little
Jake's
graph.
thing.
Got a little graph pulled up here.
Okay.
You could like screen share.
Well, I'm gonna do it this way because it's janky. All right, these are the top 10 Dow Jones Industrial Average change days.
Oh yes, I've seen those graphs. Yeah,
This is today.
Oh,
That's
It's already
11.
fifth
That's
place.
11.5%.
It's crazy.
The other dates on there are all from the late 20s, or there's one from 87, and then there's two from 2008. So if the economic indicators are any indication of what we're about to enter into economically, like this is a clear sign that we are in a recession as we speak.
Oh yeah, definitely. And we'll get out of it.
Know.
That's the thing. We will get out of it.
Of course.
It's
I heard somebody say this the other day on a piece I was watching, and he said it was a storm, but every storm has a beginning and an end.
There it is. Yep. And if you're worried about the economy, just know that in this case, we know exactly why the economy is crashing.
Yeah.
And once we deal
hey,
with
at least
it,
we know this time.
yeah. And once it's dealt with it, it'll come back. We just have to make it through that.
Right.
All right. Let's wrap things up on a lighter note here. Let's talk about Half-Life Alyx for a moment, because
Nice.
Wren and I have been playing it a whole bunch. Christian watched on Node as we did our first impressions.
It should be out now. That video should be out as you're watching this podcast.
Yes. And so the question was, is Half-Life Alyx worth buying virtual reality for? Wren says yes.
Ren says
What's the overall investment we're talking here?
Okay,
from
so
scratch?
That's a good thing.
my barrier to entry on this was very low. I do not have a PC VR headset. I take that back. I have the first two dev kits. I was like super like pioneer edge lord status of like VR back in the day, 2014 when I got my headset. And then like all the commercial headsets came out. They were expensive and I never got them. I did get a PSVR because it was a cheap option and it worked with my PlayStation. I didn't have to upgrade my computer. But when I picked up my computer from the studio over the weekend, we have the studio VR headset that was just sitting there. I was like, well, I'm going to borrow this for the times.
Did you
Yeah, but
sanitize
not
it?
everyone's got a not everyone's got a $10,000 PC.
You don't need a
and
$10,000
a headset
PC.
sitting around.
You
right?
don't need.
Yeah, so what are we looking at for computer and headset setup?
So now, if you have a decent computer from the last 2 years, you should be fine. And VR headsets, I don't know what their availability are. I recommend the Rift S because it is the best quality for the price you'll get. But if you're wanting to get one like right now, your only option very well might be the original Oculus Rift, which is still a good headset. Slightly higher quality build than this, but you have to set up sensors, which is its own.
But I was gonna say, you don't, for the one you have, you don't need sensors. You don't need a big player. You can basically
Yeah, like I can play here at my desk, and yeah, I don't have to set up sensors because the sensors are built into the headset. I mapped out like this little spot right here, and I was able to just play. There's a few weird complications with it that I found kind of annoying, just because I'm getting used to modern PC VR. But if I have to give this headset back soon, I'm at a point where I'm like, I gotta get a headset because yeah,
So you're in.
I purchased the game for myself last night, even though I don't own a PC.
Yeah, so Wren's in for sure.
The
So
Rift
you're-
S is $399, by the way. I mean, right now you're not going to find
Large
one.
investment.
Yeah.
And if you have a computer that's more than a few years old, probably the best thing to upgrade is either your RAM or your graphics card.
Or your hard drive if you don't have an SSD.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, there's literally a list of things that you can upgrade, but you can buy ready-built PCs for like $500, $600 that are VR ready, quote unquote.
I would
So
say,
you're talking from scratch. You're talking like $1,000.
And
yeah,
yeah.
from total scratch. I would say, like, what's that?
But with that, you now get an incredible experience.
And you get a nice PC. I mean, it's not like you can only play VR games, but
Yeah, it's not like you only have to play VR.
if you have a computer and it's just okay, you probably need to get a new GPU. If your GPU is older than like a 980 or 970, then you'll probably need a new GPU. But so let's say $200 to $300 for GPU and $400 for your VR headset. So let's say you're looking at $700 all in, because most people have a computer. So let's just say you need a new GPU and that's it. Christian, if you had to spend $700 to play Half-Life Alyx, would you?
Oh man, I mean, see, that's a hefty price tag because it's super cool. I mean, again, I've never played Half-Life or VR.
How about
And
just
just
the
that-
headset? Just the headset, $400. And of course,
Oh,
you have
yeah.
a VR headset, so you can do other VR stuff.
That's what I'm
too.
saying. Then I can go into VR, Skyrim, and Boneworks, or zombies.
Beat
Yeah,
Saber.
no, yeah, Beat Saber. I'm getting the itch. It's coming for sure. After watching you play, just see, I was definitely waiting on VR to make sure. I didn't want it to be blocks and pixels. Like if I'm gonna go in and invest into headset, I want it to be AAA quality. And I think watching Half-Life yesterday was the first real viewing I've seen of that level of VR that's got me interested.
Cool.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, Half-Life Alyx is great. If you guys ever get the chance, you should play it. It's Half-Life straight up.
The mechanics are really smooth.
Yeah, and it feels like they never stopped making games. Like it picks right up like where the other Half-Lives left off, and it's like you're right back in the world, and like the art style's there, and the environment and atmosphere is there.
I was surprised by the level of detail they put into their dead bodies' faces.
Yeah.
They were so realistic looking dead people.
And they're just dead bodies lying around.
Yeah, well, there's a thing with like, it seems like for a PC game to be truly a classic, it needs to have like a certain type of gore. Like PC games have a very special type of gore. Like Quake had it, Doom had it, Half-Life had it. It's like that weird low res like painted gore that's like way over the top on characters. Like, and they've brought that back for Half-Life Alyx. It's the weird over the top PC graphics gore where it's like spines fall out of guys and they blow up. It's great. So it's a wonderful game. Yeah.
Yeah, I have been playing Doom Eternal, and it's
Doom is
just
great,
gory
too.
and heavy, and it's so good.
God, Doom Eternal's wonderful. What a good game. Yeah.
Last thing, guys, if you are in the webcam market, good on you, because I don't know if you've tried to buy a webcam anywhere over the last few days. They are all out. They're all gone. Everyone bought every single one of them that left on the internet everywhere. I searched for 2 days to try to find a webcam before I eventually got in my truck and drove to the studio and got another one this morning because
Yeah.
what the heck?
Like, what am I supposed to do?
They're gone.
Yeah, I mean, Amazon Prime's on a delay. I mean, all things definitely changed.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think we should change businesses and get cam.
Start selling webcams.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, it's a good podcast. I know it's a bit of a downer one, but the whole idea is that if we're on this now, then it won't be a downer in the future, and we can make some good things happen. So, do your part. Be a good human being. Help encourage others to do the same. Share the knowledge. We promise not everything we talk about in the podcast is going to be this. In fact, we want to make a point of releasing entertainment for you guys throughout this quarantine to help you stay isolated and have a good time while doing so. So pick up a cool hobby, maybe learn an instrument. We'll keep making some cool videos for all of you. And we'll see you guys in the next podcast.
That's right.
Hey, it's Christian
There
for
it
one
is.
last
I'm
moment.
just coming in for the sign off. Yeah, you're gonna have to deal with that the whole thing. So I'm coming in for the sign off.
All right. So long, everybody.